The rain in the mansion, the rain was relentless that night. It fell in sheets across the dark skyline of New York, washing away the noise of the city and replacing it with the steady rhythm of falling water. Olivia Hayes stepped out of a yellow cab and tightened her worn jacket around herself, shivering as the cold drops hit her face. The mansion before her looked like something pulled out of a magazine: tall white columns, polished black gates, and windows that glowed faintly against the storm. She stood there for a moment, feeling small and out of place. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was just a physical therapist who worked extra hours at a small downtown clinic, helping elderly patients regain movement after accidents. The email she had received 2 nights ago still felt unreal. The Hell Foundation requests your service for a private client. Confidential case. High compensation. Urgent need. It was the kind of message people dreamed of getting, but it came with no details. Only an address. And now she was standing in front of that address when the massive iron gates opened silently. A voice spoke from a small speaker near the gatepost. "Miss Hayes?" "Yes," she answered, her voice shaking slightly. "Come in. Mr. Hale is expecting you." The sound of her sneakers splashing against the marble path echoed faintly as she walked toward the entrance. A man in a gray suit opened the door before she could knock. "You're late," he said stiffly. The rain, she started to explain, but he didn't respond. He only turned, expecting her to follow. The mansion was vast and painfully perfect. Every surface gleamed, every corner was quiet, every light was too soft. It was beautiful, but not warm. When the man opened a tall double door at the end of a long hallway, Olivia froze. There he was, Dominic Hale. He was seated near a large window that overlooked the city skyline. His wheelchair positioned in front of a grand piano, the faint reflection of lightning cut across the glass behind him, illuminating his face for only a second, long enough for Olivia to notice the sharp lines of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, and the way his hands gripped the wheels of his chair with quiet tension. "You're late," he said again, his tone low and measured. "I'm here now," she replied calmly. Setting her bag down, he turned slightly, studying her. His voice, when it came, was cool and deliberate. "You're younger than I expected. I get that a lot," she said, forcing a small smile. "I don't need sympathy." He said sharply, "I didn't bring any," she replied. "I brought experience and a bit of patience." His eyes narrowed, but for the briefest moment, something flickered in them. Curiosity, maybe? "Patience," he repeated softly, almost to himself. They looked at each other for a long time. Olivia was used to her clients looking at her with frustration, sometimes even anger, but Dominic Hale's stare was different. It wasn't cruel. It was searching, like he was trying to figure out what she wanted from him and not finding an answer. "Your first session starts tomorrow," he said finally. 6 a.m. Don't be late again. Wouldn't dream of it, she said lightly, then added as she turned to leave. "And by the way, Mr. Hale, you're not as intimidating as you think." That made him pause. He didn't smile, but she saw the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes before he looked away. The first lesson the next morning, Olivia arrived 15 minutes early. The mansion was quiet except for the soft sound of rain dripping from the roof. She carried her therapy bag and a steaming cup of coffee from the only open cafe she'd found at dawn. When she entered the room, Dominic was already there, dressed in a plain black shirt. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms marked with faint scars. He was reviewing documents on a tablet. "You're early," he said, glancing up briefly. "Thought I'd shock you," she said. "Coffee." He hesitated, then nodded. "Black, no sugar." Olivia smiled and handed him the cup. "Good guess," he muttered. She set up her equipment beside his chair. "Today's goal is basic mobility. We'll start with your legs." His expression hardened. "We've done this before. It doesn't work." "Not with me," she said gently. "Let's try anyway." For the next hour, she worked with him, guiding each movement carefully. His muscles tensed, his jaw clenched, but he didn't stop. Sweat formed along his temples, and his breathing grew heavier with each exercise. "Enough," he said finally, his voice strained. No, she said softly. We're close. He looked at her sharply. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel nothing? She didn't flinch. I know what it's like to give up before trying. The words hung between them. For a moment, she thought he'd dismiss her, but instead he exhaled and closed his eyes. Fine, he said. 5 more minutes. When the session ended, Dominic's hands trembled from the effort. Olivia wiped her forehead and smiled. You did well. His tone softened slightly. You're stubborn. You hired me for that, she said. Packing up. He didn't deny it. Asterisk, cracks in the armor days turned into weeks, and something began to shift. Dominic still kept his distance, but his sarcasm turned into conversation. Olivia started bringing small things, music for the sessions. Fresh flowers, jokes that made him roll his eyes but almost smile. One afternoon, she caught him watching her. She pretended not to notice until he finally said, You don't look at me the way they do. Who's they? Everyone, he said quietly. The board, the staff, even my doctors. They all see a machine that broke. Olivia met his gaze. You're not broken, Dominic. You just need time. He gave a bitter laugh. Time doesn't fix what's gone, and maybe it teaches you how to live without it, she said softly. That silenced him. For the first time, his expression wasn't cold. It was human. Later that day, when she packed her things, he stopped her at the door. Dinner, he said abruptly. What? Stay for dinner. I don't like eating alone. She hesitated but nodded. They ate quietly in the vast dining room. Olivia noticed how he moved with precision, cutting his food with care, his left hand steady while the right showed faint tremors. Halfway through the meal, he asked, Why are you here, really? I need the money, she said honestly. My brother's tuition? He nodded slowly. And yet you care about people too much to just do this for money. I could say the same about you, she said. He gave a low laugh. You think I care? I think you used to, she said. And you're afraid of what happens if you start again.
Ow.
Dominic didn't respond. He only stared at her, as if seeing something he couldn't name. When she stood to leave, he said quietly, Same time tomorrow? She smiled. Of course. The midnight call. It was nearly midnight when Olivia's phone vibrated on her nightstand. Unknown number? Are you awake? She frowned. Who is this? Unknown. Dominic Hale. Her heart skipped. Is everything okay? She typed Dominic. No, but it will be if you come. She didn't think she'd just dressed. Grabbed her keys and took a cab. When she arrived, the mansion was dim, quiet, except for the faint sound of piano music. Dominic was in the living room, sitting before the grand piano she had seen weeks ago. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, uncertain but determined. I didn't know you played, she said softly. He didn't look at her. I used to. Olivia moved closer, sitting beside him. Why'd you stop? His voice broke a little. Because it reminds me of what I lost. The hands that could feel every note. The legs that carried me to the stage. Silence filled the room. The only light came from the fire. Then Dominic turned toward her, his eyes raw and unguarded. Do you think I can't want you because I'm broken? He whispered. The question hit her like thunder. Her breath caught, her heart stumbled. Dominic, she began carefully. That's not, but he cut her off. You think I stopped being a man when I lost the ability to stand? His voice was quiet but trembling with anger, pain, longing, all mixed together. Olivia leaned closer. No, she said gently. I think you stopped believing that someone could still see you as one. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with something dangerous and real. Then slowly, Dominic reached out. His hand brushed a strand of her hair away from her face. His fingers hesitated near her cheek, hovering, then rested lightly against her skin. Olivia didn't move. You shouldn't look at me like that, he said softly. Like what? She whispered, like, I still matter. You do, she said. Dominic's breath caught. You'll ruin me, Olivia Hayes. Maybe I'll fix you instead. He gave a faint, broken laugh, the kind that comes from someone who hasn't laughed in years. Careful, he murmured. You're making me remember what hope feels like. Olivia smiled softly. Then maybe that's my job. They sat there in silence for a while, the firelight dancing across their faces. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first hint of dawn crept through the window. When Olivia finally stood to leave, Dominic said quietly, "Tomorrow, at the same time?" She turned to look at him, and in that moment, the hardened CEO looked like a man who had finally let someone in. "I'll be here," she said, and when she walked out into the quiet morning, she felt something new stirring inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The board meeting, the morning sun spilled through the tall glass windows of Hale Dynamics. Olivia stood outside the boardroom door, holding Dominic's coffee, her heart racing. She wasn't supposed to be there. She'd only come to deliver his files for the quarterly meeting. But inside, voices were raised. Angry, dismissive voices. "The company can't afford to look weak any longer," one man was saying. "Our investors need confidence," another added. "Dominic hasn't been the same since the accident." Olivia froze. Through the open door, she saw Dominic sitting at the head of the table, his shoulders stiff, his face unreadable. His hands rested on the wheels of his chair, fingers tense. "Do you have something you'd like to say?" Dominic's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Dominic," said a gray-haired board member, "you're a genius, but leadership requires presence. Public presence. A stable image. The shareholders are losing faith. Maybe it's time for a transition." "Transition," Dominic repeated slowly. "We mean a replacement," said another voice. "Temporary, of course, until the media sees the company as functional again." Olivia's chest tightened. Dominic's tone turned to steel. "You think a wheelchair makes me incapable of leading my own company?" "It's not about capability," the man replied carefully. "It's about perception. People want a leader who represents stability. And since your accident..." Silence filled the room. Dominic's jaw clenched. "Get out," he said quietly. "Dominic, I said get out." Every man at the table hesitated, then slowly stood. One by one, they filed out, leaving the room heavy with humiliation and anger. When the last man left, Olivia stepped forward, unsure if she should speak. Dominic turned toward her. His gray eyes were cold, distant. "You heard." "I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter," he said flatly. She placed the coffee on the table beside him. "They're wrong, you know. About you." He didn't look at her. "Perception," he murmured. "That's what they said." "Maybe they're right." Olivia shook her head. "No, they're cowards who mistake pain for weakness." For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes, something like gratitude. But he quickly looked away. "Thank you," he said softly. But kind words don't change reality. The offered 2 days passed before Olivia saw him again. When she entered the mansion for their next session, the air felt different, tense, expectant. Dominic was waiting for her in the study, dressed in a black suit. Papers were spread across the desk. "Close the door," he said quietly. Olivia did as he asked. "What's wrong?" "I need your help," he said. "But it's not about therapy." Her brows furrowed. "What kind of help?" He pushed a contract across the table toward her. She glanced at it. Legal writing filled the pages, stamped with Hale Dynamics Holdings. Her eyes widened as she reached the final clause, a temporary marriage contract, effective immediately. She looked up sharply. "This is a joke." "It isn't," he said, his voice steady. "Marriage?" She repeated. "To you?" Dominic nodded. "The board is calling for my removal. The only way to stop them is to prove I have stability commitment. A wife." Olivia took a step back, her pulse racing. "You can't be serious. I'm offering you financial security," he said. "I'll cover your brother's education, pay off your debts, and provide a monthly stipend. In return, you'll play the role of my wife for 1 year. Right?" She stared at him, stunned. "Dominic, that's insane," maybe, he admitted. "But it's necessary. Why me?" She asked. He met her gaze. "Because you're not afraid of me. Because you see me as a man, not a patient." His voice softened. And because I trust you. Olivia sank into the chair opposite him. Do you even hear how absurd this sounds? Yes, he said. But I also hear the desperation in your voice every time you talk about your brother. You need this as much as I do. Her chest tightened. You're using my struggle. I'm offering a way out, he countered. For both of us. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, Olivia whispered, And what happens when the year ends? You walk away with enough money to start over, he said. No strings, no expectations. Her mind spun. It felt wrong, dangerous. But then she thought of her brother. Liam, his tired smile, his overdue tuition, the letter from the university that had arrived that morning, threatening suspension. Let me think, she said. Dominic nodded. Take until tomorrow night. After that, the board meets again. I need an answer. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Olivia, he said quietly. She looked back. If you say yes, he continued, I'll protect you. No one will ever hurt you under my name. Something in his tone. The quiet conviction. The promise sent a shiver through her. She nodded and left without another word. The decision that night. Olivia sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment. Staring at the contract, her roommate was asleep. The only sound was the ticking clock and the hum of the refrigerator. She read every line carefully. Every clause. Every risk. It was madness, and yet it was a lifeline. Her brother's medical bills, her rent, her exhaustion, all of it could vanish with one signature. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about Dominic Hale, the man who challenged her. The man who made her feel something she couldn't name. What scared her wasn't marrying him. It was wanting to. By morning, her mind was made up. The contract. When Olivia returned to the mansion, Dominic was waiting in the library. The contract lay open on the table, a pen beside it. He looked at her calmly, but his eyes betrayed something. Fear, maybe hope. Well, he asked. Olivia took a deep breath. I'll do it. He nodded slowly, exhaling as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. I'll have my lawyer process it immediately, he said. You'll move into the mansion tomorrow. Publicly, we'll announce an engagement, followed by a wedding next month. She hesitated. Dominic, I don't know how to pretend to be. He cut her off gently. Just be yourself. I'll handle the rest. When she reached for the pen, his voice softened. Olivia, she looked up. If at any point you want out, you just say so. I'll let you go, no questions asked. Her throat tightened. You won't need to. She signed, and in that moment, everything changed. The first night in his world, the next evening, Olivia stood at the entrance of the Hale mansion with 2 suitcases and a heart that refused to stay calm. Dominic was waiting by the fireplace. He wore a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly tousled. Welcome home, he said quietly. She tried to smile. Home feels different. You'll get used to it, he said. Your room's upstairs? First door on the right. As she walked past, he added, There's a dinner tomorrow, investors. You'll come as my fiancé. Stomach dropped. Tomorrow? He nodded. We don't have time to ease into this. Do I at least get a dress? She asked, half joking. Dominic's lips curved faintly. Already taken care of. Later that night, Olivia found the dress hanging in her room, a sleek black gown made of silk. Elegant but simple. On the dresser was a handwritten note. Wear this tomorrow. Trust me. She stared at the note for a long time, her fingers brushing the edge. Trust me, he'd written. For some reason she did. The dinner? The restaurant shimmered with crystal lights and quiet laughter. The city's elite filled the tables, their eyes curious as Dominic Hale arrived, the man they hadn't seen in years. With a woman on his arm, Olivia's hand rested lightly on his. She could feel the strength in his grip, the warmth beneath the polished control. Every step he took, every nod to familiar faces, carried power not from standing tall, but from refusing to bow. They sat at the main table beside 3 major investors. Dominic introduced her with calm authority. This is Olivia, he said simply. My fiancée. The room went quiet for a heartbeat, then filled with polite congratulations. Olivia smiled, her nerves trembling beneath the surface. Dominic never once looked uncertain. His voice was steady, his posture commanding, but when his hand found hers under the table, she realized he was just as nervous. As the dinner went on, they began to relax. They laughed, exchanged glances, played their parts so perfectly it almost didn't feel like pretending, until one of the investors leaned forward with a smirk. "Mr. Hale, forgive me, but some people say your accident left you incapable of certain things." The table fell silent. Dominic's expression didn't change. His tone, however, dropped to something low and dangerous. "Careful with your words." The man laughed awkwardly. "I meant no offense. Just curious how a man in your position keeps up with someone so young," and Olivia cut him off. "He's more of a man than anyone in this room." Dominic turned to her, eyes wide with surprise. The man stammered. Of course, excuse us," Dominic said coolly, wheeling back from the table. "We're done here." Outside, under the soft glow of the restaurant's lights, he stopped and turned toward her. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did," she said. "They were wrong." It was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "You think I can't want you because I'm broken?" Her heart stopped. "I think," she said softly, "you've already proven you can." Dominic's gaze darkened. "Careful, Olivia. You'll make me forget this is all pretend." "Maybe it doesn't have to be," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't respond, but his eyes, the way they lingered on her, said enough. The kiss, the drive home was silent. When they reached the mansion, Dominic dismissed the driver and rolled toward the entrance alone. Olivia followed quietly, her heart still pounding from the confrontation at dinner. Inside, the air was still. The fire crackled softly in the grand room. Dominic stopped by the window, his reflection glowing faintly in the glass. "You shouldn't have to protect me," he said. "I didn't do it for you," she said softly. "I did it because they were wrong." He turned to face her. The storm that lived behind his eyes was gone now, replaced by something deeper, gentler, more dangerous. "Olivia," he said quietly, "this was supposed to be simple. I know it's not anymore." She nodded. "I know that too." And then he reached for her. Slowly, deliberately, he took her hand, pulling her closer until she stood between his knees. His fingers brushed her wrist, tracing the faint pulse there. "I can't promise this is right," he whispered. "Then promise it's real," she said. Dominic's control finally cracked. His hand slid to her waist, his eyes searching hers one last time for permission. She gave it with a whisper, and he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, raw, full of everything they'd both been holding back: pain, longing, fear, hope. The world outside disappeared. There was only his warmth, his breath, his quiet tremor as he held her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Dominic pressed his forehead to hers. "That wasn't part of the contract." He murmured. "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But maybe it should have been." And somewhere between that kiss and the silence that followed, the line between pretending and truth vanished completely. The morning after sunlight poured softly through the curtains, painting golden streaks across the floor of the Hale mansion. Olivia stood by the kitchen window, a cup of coffee in her trembling hands. The night before felt like a dream, or maybe a mistake. She wasn't sure which. Dominic hadn't spoken since that kiss. After it happened, he had simply looked at her, his breath uneven, his eyes lost somewhere between guilt and longing. Then he'd wheeled away without a word. Now, hours later, the silence between them was louder than any argument. When he entered the kitchen, dressed in a crisp white shirt, she turned quickly. "Morning," she said. Trying to sound calm, he didn't look at her. "Morning." The air thickened. Finally, Olivia spoke again. "About last night, it was a mistake," he said, his tone clipped. "We crossed a line we shouldn't have." Her chest tightened. "A mistake," she repeated softly. He nodded, his jaw tight. "We have a deal." "Let's not complicate it." Olivia swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Of course. Strictly business." But when she turned away, her eyes burned. Dominic watched her leave the room. his hands gripping the wheels of his chair until his knuckles turned white. He closed his eyes. The taste of her still lingered, the softness, the fire, the truth of it, and for the first time since his accident, he wished he could chase after someone, breaking point. Days that followed were different. Dominic threw himself into work. Meetings, calls, endless designs. He ignored Olivia's attempts at conversation, answering in short, cold replies. But every time she entered the room, he felt that quiet pull toward her, the warmth he was fighting to forget. One evening, she found him in his study, papers scattered around him, his hand pressed against his leg. "Dominic," she said softly, "you're pushing too hard." He didn't look up. "I don't need your concern. You need rest." "I need results," he snapped, his voice rising. "You think I can afford to rest when half the world is waiting for me to fail?" Olivia froze. The anger in his voice wasn't really for her. It was for himself. "Dominic," she whispered, "no one wants you to fail." He looked up sharply. "Then why does it feel like everyone left except you?" The words broke something inside her. "Because I chose to stay," she said, tears in her voice. "Not for money. Not for pity. For you?" He stared at her, his chest rising and falling fast. Then, almost too quietly, he said, "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't care for me," he said. "Because if you do, I won't survive it when you leave." Olivia's tears finally fell. "Then don't give me a reason to." She walked out. That night, Dominic sat alone in the dark, the echoes of her voice replaying like a heartbeat. The fall 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. It happened during a public charity gala. Olivia stood beside Dominic, smiling for the cameras, pretending everything was fine. But when a journalist asked, "Mr. Hale, how's life as a married man?" Dominic hesitated. His silence lasted 1 second too long. The cameras flashed. The crowd whispered, and Olivia knew the lie was unraveling. Later that night, after the event, they argued, really argued for the first time. "You humiliated me," she shouted. "I told you this was just an act," he snapped back. "You didn't act like it when you kissed me?" He froze. The words hung in the air like thunder. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" she demanded. "From me," he said. "From what this could become." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "You don't get it, do you? You're not protecting me. You're punishing yourself." Dominic looked away, unable to meet her eyes. When she turned to leave, he whispered, "Don't go." That night, for the first time since she'd come into his life, Dominic Hale was truly alone. The accident a week passed. Olivia didn't return. The mansion felt empty, colder, somehow smaller. Dominic buried himself in work again. He ignored calls from the board, skipped meals, refused therapy, until one night, exhaustion won. He fell from his chair while reaching for a file and hit the marble floor hard. Pain shot through his arm, but worse was the humiliation lying there, helpless, staring at the ceiling. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey. For the first time in years, Dominic Hale cried, not from pain, but from despair. And in that moment, he realized something. It wasn't his legs that made him weak. It was his fear. Fear of needing someone. Fear of being loved. He whispered into the silence, "Olivia?" The return when Olivia's phone rang that night. She almost didn't answer. But when she heard the butler's voice, her heart froze. "Miss Hayes, it's Mr. Hale. He's hurt." Within 20 minutes, she was there. She found him on the floor, pale and shaking, his right arm bruised. "Oh my God," she whispered, rushing to him. "Dominic, what happened?" He looked up at her, eyes filled with pain and something deeper. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, kneeling beside him. "Hold on, don't," he said softly. "Just stay." Her hands trembled as she helped him back into his chair. Once he was seated, she cupped his face gently, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You stubborn, impossible man," she whispered. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" He swallowed hard. "Because I thought I deserved to be alone." Olivia shook her head. "No one deserves that. Not even you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dominic whispered, I thought I was protecting you. From what? She asked again. From loving me. Tears filled her eyes. Too late. And this time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no guilt, just truth. The fight back the next morning marked the start of something new. Olivia took charge. She called his doctor, resumed his therapy, and refused to let him hide behind his work. You're going to walk again, she told him firmly. He gave a tired laugh. You're relentless. I learned from the best, she said, smiling. Every day became a battle stretches, resistance exercises, hours of pain and frustration. Dominic cursed, sweated, trembled, but never stopped, and every time he wanted to quit, Olivia was there. You can do this, she'd whisper. You just have to believe it. Slowly, his body began to change. Sensation returned. Muscles strengthened. Hope grew. Weeks turned into months. One evening, as Olivia adjusted his brace, Dominic looked at her and said quietly, You changed everything, she smiled. No, you did. He shook his head. No, Olivia. You gave me back my life. The first step, it was late spring when it finally happened. The therapy room was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Dominic stood between the parallel bars, his hands gripping them tightly, his legs trembling. Olivia stood beside him, her heart racing. You don't have to do this today, she said softly. He looked at her, his voice steady. I do. He took a breath. Then another, and slowly, painfully, he lifted one foot. It hovered for a moment. Uncertain, then touched the ground. Olivia gasped. Tears filled her eyes. Dominic. He took another step. Then another. Each one was a war, but he kept going until he reached her. When he finally let go of the bars, his body swayed and Olivia caught him. He laughed, breathless. Looks like I still fall for you. She laughed through her tears. You idiot. But she didn't let go. Neither did he. And for the first time, Dominic Hell stood not as a billionaire, not as a man in a chair, but as someone who had learned how to fight, to love, to live again. 1 year later, a year passed. The world had changed. Whole Dynamics was thriving again under Dominic's leadership. The press called his recovery miraculous, called it Olivia. They had dissolved the contract months ago, but the marriage remained. Real this time. On a quiet afternoon, they sat together in the garden behind the mansion. The sun was warm, the air soft with the scent of jasmine. Olivia leaned against him, her fingers intertwined with his. Do you ever think about the day we met? She asked. All the time, he said. You were late. She smiled. You were rude. You were fearless, he said softly. You looked at me like I wasn't broken, 'cause you never were, she whispered. He turned to her, eyes glinting. You know what's funny? What? I spent years building an empire to prove I was enough. Turns out, all it took was one woman who saw me before the world did.